Welcome to the Nutritional Mental Health Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the intersection of nutrition and psychological sciences. I'm your host, Annika Angelo, a nutritional mental health practitioner with a master's in health psychology. I'm passionate about making science accessible and stories listened to. To dive deeper into nutritional psychology, you can find me on Instagram at NutriMindCoach. And now, let's get into this episode. If you've ever wondered about how your hormonal cycle impacts ADHD, this is everything you'll ever want to know. So I'm chatting today with June. She's one of my friends from Norway, and she experienced both PMDD and is now navigating perimenopausal ADHD. So she runs a social media page to raise awareness to help other women feel not so alone in this, and that's kind of how we met. But yeah, so just thanks so much for joining in this chat, and I'm just excited to talk more about this because it's a topic that's very close to me as also a woman with ADHD, and yeah, it's an important conversation. So
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I was very honored to be able to be here.
well, you have so much just personal experience with this, and that's also something that I love talking about. I just love hearing people's stories. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit more about your experience growing up with PMDD. How did you learn about it? All of that.
Yeah. I don't think I reflected very much about it growing up. The general advice for young girls is just it's hard to be a woman, so pull yourself together and go on. So I did that. And I felt ashamed sometimes because I didn't feel I was able to handle things that other women did. But as a teenager, I don't think it was a problem yet because the hormones are a mess when you're a teenager. So
Yep.
it was after I passed 20 something, I noticed I had mood swings, but I wasn't sure if it was more than other people or it was just, I don't know. I had chocolate cravings, but my friends had that too. So yeah, I thought this was how it was supposed to be. And I was a student also, and life is different from when you start working. And yeah, but I had from my teenage years a terrible migraine, always the days before and after menstruation started. Sometimes it was lurking in the background for about a week, threatening to break out, and it was very stressful for me. And muscle tension and tension headaches. Yeah, and that I thought about that very much because my friends didn't seem to have these problems. But I wasn't fully aware of the muscle tension in connection to the luteal phase or hormone swings. Yeah, that's how I am, you know.
Right. It was just part of your experience as a person menstruating.
Yeah. So I don't know if I thought that other people had these things and just handle it better, or I don't know. But I felt like maybe I'm weaker than other people. And I know now that I'm not weaker, maybe stronger because I've been dealing with all these things that the others didn't.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, because I grew up, I'm one of those lucky ones who is honestly like PMS is not really a thing for me. Like I can notice a little bit of like my mood's a little bit lower, or in general, I'm a little bit more hungry, but it doesn't typically manifest itself for me, which is amazing. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah,
But then, like, that's the same thing. I thought that was what everybody experienced.
yeah,
And so when like people were like, "Oh my gosh, my periods are so painful," I I mean, looking back, horrible to think. Like I was like, "Oh, that's why they're not that bad." Like
yeah,
yeah, but it's such a wide spectrum of experience
absolutely.
that
Because
we just
I
don't
didn't,
know until we talk.
yeah. So my cramps was not bad really, and I had a friend who used to faint because of the pain she had. And that was an eye-opener for me too, because I didn't have to do that. Um, but I think the PMDD problems developed over the years, maybe following more responsibilities and dealing with the
Right,
grown-up
like
life.
more stress.
Yeah, maybe hormones. I believe that hormones don't settle until you are mid-20. I don't know if that's correct, but that was when I started to notice a significant changes as my cycle moved on. So yeah,
So you talked a little
PMDD.
bit, so you talked a little bit about just like the mood swings. What did that look like for you, or does it?
Um, in my 20s or now?
Maybe kind of both.
Yeah, in my 20s, I think I was just I was easily moved by movies and started to cry, and I craved chocolate and migraines, of course. I felt like it was not just as bad every time, but sometimes I felt my nerves were outside my skin, so that I was so afraid of things. I started worrying about what if something happens, or what if I die? What if my boyfriend dies? What if everything was just, the world felt so dangerous, maybe. And then suddenly everything back to normal after a few days. So, yeah,
So it's like that intense, just
yeah,
anxiety basically that came only during that period of time when you were about to
yeah,
or on your period.
absolutely. Um, and it has become worse over the years, maybe because I'm now mid 40, but also maybe because I've been under a lot of stress the past years, and I think that's very unhealthy for the body to go through over a long period of time. So I think that has been something that has affected my PMS or PMDD.
Yeah, I mean, stress is just, that's like the silent killer of everything. Like dysregulations in your cortisol responses, like chronic
Yeah,
stress is so bad for our body. There's,
absolutely.
yeah, it just kind of makes it go a little haywire.
Yeah, and I've been working very much lately um, to say to my body that you don't have to be in this state anymore. Um, and I have achieved that now. Finally, I'm in that phase. So I'm very happy about that, because fight or flight response, and to be in that state chronically for so long, it's very it's very tiring. It's exhausting.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is actually something I've heard anecdotally. I haven't looked into the research at all, but I have quite a few people online who I'm friends with who have PMDD, and they talk a lot about nervous system regulation and how that's been really important for them in just managing their symptoms.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, being able to do those somatic skills and try to work that body to get it out of fight and flight all the time.
Yeah, it's very important, and learning techniques to manage, it's very, very important.
What kind of techniques do you prefer nowadays?
Well, I have ADHD, so my plans usually change. But the best technique, I think, is to just go outside, put on my jacket and my boots in all kinds of weather, and just be outside. I have a forest very close to my house, and I love that forest because it's very mossy and with old trees that are rotting and just falling down, and there's so much life there, and it feels I feel so connected when I'm there. So just being there and observing strange things,
I love
mushrooms
that.
and moss, and yeah.
And that actually does have some scientific backing. I don't remember if I
Yeah,
told you this when we talked about it, but forests, specifically forests, have been associated with like decreasing cortisol responses, like and also like blood pressure, heart rate, all the, typical markers of fight and flight. But it doesn't necessarily translate to like green spaces or like being around plants in your home. But it's specifically like going into a forest
yeah,
that improves your cortisol responses. So
absolutely. I read about that and Japanese forest bathing.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, all of those studies are done from the Japanese
Yeah,
culture, which is amazing. I love that.
yeah. And it sounds very strange, but I don't go around hugging trees because yeah, it's not just for me, but if you lean into an old tree, just stand there and lean, it's very calming.
Mm.
Um, so
Feel so supported by
yeah,
the grounding
absolutely.
effect of the tree.
Yeah,
Mm.
very grounding. It's yeah,
And managing cortisol, just in general, managing stress is super important for ADHD as well, because we do see in most people with ADHD dysregulation in cortisol responses. So that's also another thing to add on to the list of how to manage your ADHD.
yeah,
So, but with ADHD, how did you come across it for yourself? What's your story there?
yeah. You know, I was little in the 80s, and back then nobody talks about ADHD, so that was never any topic at all. Um, I think it was when I started to be a teacher that I noticed that I had problems with seeing things clearly. I thought I paid attention in the class, but I often discovered that I hadn't. I didn't notice important messages. Um, I missed important, yeah, things to yeah. So I started to wonder what's wrong with me. Why didn't I hear this? I was taking notes all the time. Um, and I also had problems with prioritizing tasks, what's important to do and in what order. Um, like regular chores in the house, like washing the dishes. I knew I had to do it, but sometimes it felt so hard, almost impossible. Just
Oh, dishes are just honestly the worst part.
yeah, yeah,
So hard. I
it
have to tell
is.
myself dishes are my favorite hobby. Like all those like different ways to trick your brain. Like I tell myself I love doing dishes. They're like my favorite thing to do. So that like my brain like pretends to think that it is. And it works sometimes.
Yeah, because sometimes when I have started to do the dishes, it's a mindful activity actually.
Mhm.
It's just thinking about doing it. It feels
Yeah.
very impossible.
No, I like
Mm.
that. One of my religion courses, there was a professor who was amazing. Her name was Charlotte. But okay, tangent, but I just loved her so much. But that was one of the things she talked about, like when we did our course on Buddhism. Um, just that mindfulness aspect of even just washing the dishes. Like you can be mindful while doing even those small things,
Yeah, absolutely.
like being so fully present, just like
Yeah.
feeling all the water on it, feeling the soap, feeling how you're just moving it in circles. Like it's just such a mindful experience.
It is actually, and you can just get soaked into the experience.
But it's
It's
hard to start.
yeah, absolutely. And watching the dishes that needs to be washed.
Mm,
Oh,
it's so many steps.
yeah.
But that's something you probably noticed too. Like a lot of people, just like the neurotypical population, like it's not a lot of steps. Like that's not their problem. Like let's take taking a shower, for example. Like
Yeah.
my husband just goes into the shower and he's like, oh, that's just part of my routine. For me, it's like so many steps. I have
Oh, yeah.
to think about it. I have to prep myself to go into it. Have to like make sure like everything's right, you know? Like it's not just one step. And then you also have to like
Absolutely. I know.
get dressed and
And
like so much.
yeah, and then fetch my clothes and
Hmm.
make it fit into the plans. And I actually tell my husband, I'm going to take a shower now. Just that's a step too. I don't know. It's yeah, very strange. Um, yeah, but these things I started to notice when I was a student, I think, because my friends didn't have all these steps. They just did the dishes and they just did things. And I also had problems with managing money because I had to plan how long will this money last. And it's a student loan. Um, in Norway, we have very good student loans. But we got the student loan in August and in January, so I had to make it last, and that was very hard to plan because I wasn't able to think about it wasn't just the rent and it wasn't just the food. I also had to plan for plane tickets home for Christmas and for autumn break and all the takeaway coffees and those things.
Those
So
are very important to factor in.
yeah. So it always ended up with me in the end of October stressing out finding an extra job. So yeah, I always managed, but it was harder for me than for others. And
Yeah.
yeah, I felt often very ashamed because I felt so chaotic compared to the others. Uh, I don't know. Have you similar experiences with chaos?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely overcompensate a lot. And since I have like a really good background in psychology, I'm able to like understand a lot of like what my brain is doing and how to
Mm-hmm.
like use effective therapeutic tendencies for myself.
Yeah,
So like that's actually been super, super important in my journey, just having all that base knowledge so that I can essentially therapize myself
yeah,
and do all those CBT techniques. And it's, yeah, but chaos, that feels like an exact, just the right word for my entire life.
yeah.
Like it's so hard not to just like, you know what I want to do right now? Rearrange my entire house,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or maybe, yeah, I'll just buy a plane ticket somewhere right now. Like, sure.
Yeah,
And yeah, I totally resound. I feel like for a lot of people with ADHD, money just doesn't seem real, except for the money that you're spending that day.
yeah,
And even sometimes, even then, it doesn't feel real.
yeah. Because I take a look at my account. I even have, I can check my account from my phone, and I take a look at my account. Oh, lots of money, and it's just not. Oh, yeah, it's not real. It's
It's
just,
just a concept. It's not
it's
like,
available right now, you know.
yeah.
And then the end of the month, oh, the money, where are they gone?
Yes, have to learn how to manage it. And budgets
Yeah,
are just so impossible to, I don't know. I've never been able to handle a budget.
no, I don't
I don't
understand
know.
it either. Yeah, I can do maths, but yeah, I don't. Budget's very hard.
Right. And like that's also something like a lot of people with ADHD, we're actually good at like learning. We're good at all these different things. It's just
Yeah.
practical application is maybe not our strong suit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then that's so frustrating because I I think I'm quite intelligent, if I have to say so myself.
Yeah, I'd believe
But
that.
it's just doing what I know. That's the hard part,
Hmm.
and that's very frustrating
Hmm.
because I love to learn new things, and I get hyper focused on different things, and I can tell you things about rocks or um, earth.
Amazing. You had a rock phase too?
Oh yeah, you did that too.
Oh yeah. Basically most of my childhood. I loved rocks so much.
Oh yeah, I
I
had
still do. I have so many.
yeah, me too. And I had a rock face the last year too. I almost froze my fingers off because I was so obsessed with getting out those rocks from a little small brook.
Wow, if I ever go to Norway, I will hit you up and we can go rock hunting together.
Oh yeah, that would be lovely. Yeah, but that
Oh,
was the thing too. I noticed my friends didn't either get so obsessed with different things all the time that I did, and yeah, I often felt very different uh, from my teenage years. I think I felt that something was different, but I didn't know what and how. Um, yeah, as a child, I was very restless. I had to be with people all the time, and if I wasn't hanging around with people or climbing trees, I was reading. So I read and read and read books. And when I was finished, I read them again and went to the library.
oh, it sounds
Um,
exactly like me as a kid.
yeah,
I started, my mom loves to tell the story, but like I was reading chapter books by age 4. Like that's how much I just
yeah, I
loved
did that
reading.
too.
Yes.
Yeah, my mom didn't know that I'd learned to read because I had a friend who was 3 years older than me. So when she did her homework, was sitting beside her and her mother and observed. And I learned to read at the same time she did. So when I was 4 and
Amazing.
she was 7, yeah, I was reading. So yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
ADHD, it does make you feel different, especially if
yeah.
you didn't know about it. Like
Hmm.
there are all those extra hidden challenges that aren't present in other people. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, like we talked about, like it takes more than just one step to do a task.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even if we think about eating, like eating, it's not just eating. Like you have to open up your mouth. You have to like bring your fork up to your mouth. You have to chew it. Like
Yeah.
sometimes chewing is just too much work.
Sometimes I stop eating dinner because I'm bored. I don't want to eat
Hmm.
anymore. What
Yeah,
is
and
that?
that's also something that I've heard people talk about. Like, it's just boring.
Yeah. No, I'm done now. I don't want to chew anymore. I want to sit down and have my coffee. It's very strange. So, yeah.
And so you have looked a little bit into the female hormonal cycle in ADHD. So I'd love
Yeah.
for you just like tell us more about that.
Yeah. I recently discovered this because no one ever told me because I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my 30s when my cousin got her diagnosed. And I started to think that we were very alike. We had a very good connection because we had things we could talk about that other people never knew about us because we were the only ones who experienced these things, we thought. So, yeah, when I was diagnosed at 35, it was basically just assessing and getting the diagnosis and then have some medical appointments to find my stimulants. And
Mhm.
then it was okay, bye bye, good luck. So I discovered about the hormone connection to ADHD symptoms recently. And that made me so angry because I have lived my whole life thinking that I was weak and not able, incapable. And now I found that my hormone fluctuations, they are actually increasing the ADHD symptoms sometimes. And I never knew that until recently. And I was thinking that I have to collect this information. So I started to gather my findings and research. And yeah, I had a few Google documents. And then I discovered, I've been reading Attitude magazine. And there I found a cycle tracker, but it wasn't a cycle tracker for hormonal symptoms. It was a cycle tracker for ADHD symptoms. And then everything fell into place for me. That's how it is. So yeah, I started to do some more research, and I finally feel that I am allowed to feel bad some days, and I'm allowed to feel good other days because it's natural.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, but I had to be 45 until I discovered that. I wasn't aware that the estrogen and the progesterone were so impactful, and the progesterone peak is so much higher than I ever knew. Yeah, you know more about this than I do, but
Oh, but you know so much.
yeah, I'm learning. Yeah, and I also started to do some research about PMDD because I mentioned this to my doctor a few years ago, and he's a very nice and knowledgeable doctor, but I don't think he had ever heard about that. So just nodded, and yeah.
That does sound
So
like the experience of a lot of people with PMDD. Like their doctor doesn't know what it is,
yeah,
which is valid. I mean, like doctors have to learn a lot, and it is sort of an emerging idea in the last like what 20 or 30 years.
yeah,
Um, but I'm glad it sounds like you have one who's at least willing to listen to you.
yeah. He's now he's used to me coming and waving an article at him. Look what I found. This is
That's
and
amazing.
yeah, and he accepts. He doesn't protest. He just says okay. So when I say I read this about PMDD and I think I have to increase my medication for 1 week of the month, and he says okay, let's try that. So he's very open to my suggestions because they are based on research. So yeah,
So
I have.
what times in like the menstrual cycle do people tend to feel like better ADHD symptoms versus worse ADHD symptoms?
The worst ADHD symptoms come in the luteal phase, and that's after ovulation and before you start menstruation. And that's when I feel the most brain fog. Sometimes I feel like I have a brain damage because I'm just not able to process things. I can sit in meetings at work and I know very much about this, but I'm just not able to take it in, what you're saying. So brain fog and forgetfulness, fatigue, headaches, that could be in the luteal phase. Also, for usual PMS. And when you finish, when you start menstruating, then the estrogen starts rising again and the progesterone falls, and you start feeling better. So after a few days of menstruating, I'm on top again. So that's when I organize my house and get things done. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, not sure if this is too TMI, but like the last few days have been horrible. Like my brain fog has been honestly so bad. I'm also extra stressed, and so I think that also like sort of added like that compound to all
Yeah,
of this. But yeah, like I've barely been able to focus. Prioritization is not happening. Like, I
absolutely.
mean, it rarely happens anyway. I usually just like follow my whim for what I want to do that day for posting or writing or
Yeah,
whatever. In general, I try to have like a nice plan. Doesn't usually work. But like the last few days have been extra hard.
yeah.
And I
I
just
have
finally broke
this.
through and it's like, oh, yep, always happens.
Yeah, I've been doing this also the past 2 weeks. I've been in a fog. Just I haven't posted anything. Just and I have allowed myself to just, okay, you need this break. So
Mm,
yeah,
breaks are so important.
yeah,
Forced breaks.
yeah,
Like scheduling those, even though it's one of the hardest things to do with ADHD, just like making sure that you're breaking.
yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, and then for the like the hormonal cycle, right? You just talked about how like we tend to have worse symptoms when our estrogen and progesterone are lower
yeah,
and tends to improve when it increases. And
yeah. And it's not just the PMS; it's also ADHD symptoms.
yeah, yeah, like it's a lot harder to mask those ADHD tendencies.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
for sure. Um, and with that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the brain because, like, that's kind of what I love to know.
yeah,
So, in our brain, there's a few enzymes that regulate both dopamine and serotonin and most of the other neurotransmitters like norepinephrine. So, those two are the COMT and MAOA enzymes. And what we've been learning is that estrogen actually modulates some of that activity, which is really interesting. So those two enzymes, they break down dopamine. And basically what we see is when estrogen is at its highest, the activity of those are at their lowest. So it means that we're not breaking down as much of those neurotransmitters in our brain. But when we're on our period, like during that time of the lowest estrogen and progesterone, like we see increases in activity there. And so basically, like that's just that connection of how, like, why does ADHDs tend to be harder to handle during like the late luteal phase and the period phase? Like, oh, it's because our brain is literally using up more of our neurotransmitters.
yeah,
Isn't that just wild? And also, there's also differences with serotonin in the brains of people who have PMDD specifically. When they're on like the late luteal phase and the period phase, they actually have lower sensitivity to serotonin receptors, which basically that kind of also correlates to increases in anxiety and depression.
oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's not just you, right? It's not just, oh, I just have this, blah, da, da, da. It's literally your brain.
yeah, it's very interesting. Uh, I'm also very interested in the brain because I studied special education, um, and I started to learn more about the brain and the connections between ADHD and dyslexia and language impairments. And there's so many connections and so many of the same things happening. Um, it's very interesting to learn about how the brain works and the working memory also.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's so interesting.
yeah, and the hormones
Uh-huh.
in all of this.
And then speaking of hormones, you're going through perimenopause.
Yeah,
That's also when a lot of women tend to actually get diagnosed because it's, yeah, it just becomes a lot more prevalent.
yeah, absolutely. And I also have a girl, she's 11, so she's starting with some puberty hormones, and
Mm.
she got her diagnosis just a few weeks ago. Because the hormones is so clear. The hormones affect her symptoms and become more visible.
So interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then for medication, you kind of mentioned that you brought it up to your doctor that, right? Like
yeah. Uh,
like what have you learned about that?
um, yeah, I take stimulants, and that's a lifesaver for me, actually. Um, yeah, I read that you can increase um, the stimulant doses in luteal phase to help this ADHD symptoms, because in this phase the medication can actually work less effective. So he said, okay, let's try that. And it works. So I have 50 milligrams usually, and 70 in my luteal phase now. And that works so much better than without.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And
So,
imagine if you like never came across that piece of research.
sorry.
Like I said, imagine if you never came across that piece
Yeah,
of research. You would
I
have
would
just
never,
been, yeah,
because no one's ever told me these things. I have come across them myself. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about these things, because there has to be more women like me. I'm sure about that. Um, and I also read articles about other medications to help PMDD, especially during perimenopause. Um, so I already had Wellbutrin, but I stopped using them because I needed a break. Because sometimes when I use them for a long time, I tend to feel more stressed. So when I have a break and start again, it works better. So I read that sometimes doctors recommend using Wellbutrin also in the luteal phase, because they don't you don't have to use them for a long time before they start working like other
Mhm.
antidepressants. So that was very interesting. So I started to try that too. Um, and that the first time I tried that, I was in London in a holiday with my family. So I don't know if I felt happier because I was there, because I love London, or because it was the medication. But yeah, I have to try that for a few cycles before I can tell for sure. Um, and also another medication that I already had, because I had a nerve damage in my foot, was also mentioned in a few articles. Neurontine. I don't remember why that should help, but I have tried it, and sometimes during these PMDD days in luteal phase, everything can feel so dark. It's much darker now than it was when I in my 20s. Everything feels. I'm not suicidal, but I sometimes think, oh, it's not worth it. This is
Yeah.
just too hard. I don't want to do this anymore. It's just everything feels so hard and so dark, and my nerves are even more outside my skin than it was before, because now I have kids and and I worry about them, and my parents have passed away, so I don't have any very close relatives. Um, so everything feels so vulnerable
Mhm.
is especially when these days. So yeah, Neurontine is so much better because it helps my anxiety.
Mm.
But I get a bit dizzy from them.
No.
Yeah, so it's it's not something I like. I didn't like to use them when I was working as a teacher, because sometimes when I had forgotten to eat my lunch, I started to get dizzy, and I didn't like to feel almost high when I was around kids. So yeah, it's important to to eat regularly. That's the lesson.
Yeah, no, that's a lesson I have to tell myself literally every single day. And I'm in the literature almost every day. Like, again, that's like that common ADHD thing. You can know
Yeah,
something, but the practical application of it,
yeah.
it's hard.
It's very hard, and at work I used to. It's easier to eat because yeah, now it's my lunchtime, so that's when we sit down and eat our lunch. So when when I'm working on my own, like I am now, no one is telling me that this is lunchtime. So sometimes, oh, my kids are coming back, I haven't eaten, and I'm so dizzy because I haven't eaten anything. So then I raid the baking cabinet and eat some chocolate just to
Yep. Give
just to be
yourself
able.
that really quick energy so that your
Yeah,
brain can handle like other things. And
yeah.
it's, yeah.
And I forget to drink water too, and
Oh,
I
same.
need so much water, but I just forget. So
Mm.
I have to remind myself. I have these bottles standing around, just ready, just take a sip.
Yeah. That's actually such a good solution, like having water bottles in like as many rooms as you can.
Yeah,
Like that's really smart.
it is. So I have one in my bedside table. Oh, I haven't drunk any water. Oh, there's my bottle. I can drink some water.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
hydration, I mean, that's not just important for general living. It's important for your mental health too. Like, I mean, our brain, it's made of like 73% water. Like,
yeah.
just imagine what being dehydrated does to that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's so fascinating. My brother-in-law had a very big um, stroke in the uh, front core. What is it called here? Uh,
Um, is
frontal
that
cortex.
the prefrontal cortex?
Yeah, yeah. It was a very severe stroke, and it was very critical for a while. Um, so then I read a lot about how these things works, because when we had these updates, and then they said now this is happening, and now this condition, and I need to understand things. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yes.
So when I hear something, I don't accept it. I just, oh, I have to learn more about this. So I read a lot about the brain, and yeah, and the water in the brain, and yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's
really, really interesting. I mean,
very.
there are some studies out there even that increasing your water during when you are depressed can actually decrease your depressive symptom severity, which
Yeah,
is so interesting. We don't have any research yet on ADHD, but I'm really hoping somebody decides to do a study on that.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, there's not enough research in general right now.
No, there's not enough. But I remember when my cousin was diagnosed, she got her diagnosis from the best psychiatrist in Norway. Um, the one who has researched the most about women or young women and ADHD, and she said water, protein, and omega-3 fatty acids, and sleep. So yeah, I think there must be some kind of research. I don't think it's just something she said, but I haven't
I mean, in
found.
general, like hydration is super important.
Yeah, it
Like,
is.
and it's also really important, especially during the late luteal phase and the period phase, because estrogen is also basically like when we don't have enough estrogen, our body doesn't process water as effectively.
Yeah,
So that's also why a lot of people tend to get a lot of headaches during like that period phase, because
yeah,
basically the body just needs more water to not be as dehydrated.
yeah. And the strange thing is, the more dehydrated I am, the worse it is to drink something. I just,
Mm,
I just can't drink. And I don't know if that's an ADHD thing or what, but when I need something, I just don't do what I have to do
yeah,
to get
that's
better.
where tricking the brain comes in. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
think it's so funny because I'll tell my husband all about these different tricks that I use to trick my brain. And then he tells me, like, what? Tricking your brain? That's what?
Yeah, but
And then
it's
you realize, like,
possible.
oh, right, no,
Yeah, it's
that's
possible.
just a me thing.
Yeah,
Oh.
but it helps sometimes to just decide. If I just decide, but I have to do this, I have to drink now,
Mhm,
or I have to eat now.
mhm.
So I've created a routine. Um, I have to make myself a very delicious cup of coffee with ginger. And that's something that I look forward to. So now I have started to remember to eat lunch because then I can make my delicious coffee.
Oh, I love
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
For me, I have like a show I watch every time I eat lunch, and so that's how I make sure that I eat lunch.
Yeah, that's amazing. I did that too, but now I don't have a show. I need a new show.
Mm. Oh, yeah, that's one of the things that actually works for me. Like eating distracted, that's not a bad thing. I mean,
No,
ideally we're eating and like being mindful about it, but like our first step is eating. Like,
yeah,
don't be mindful if you're not actually eating it.
if I don't do something else, if I'm alone, if I don't do something else when I eat, I just can't eat. It's just so
Yeah.
boring.
Oh, it's so boring.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even
like
if
you're
I'm
just
hungry.
looking at your, oh.
Yeah. What? So yeah, I have to do something multitasking. So
Mhm. Like, is it the best for our brains to multitask? Not specifically, but is it going to make you eat? Yeah, and that's more important.
yeah. And I remember that when I was little, I was so obsessed with cartoons.
Mhm.
And my mother bought lots and lots of cartoons on like used. They were used and cheap. So I was reading and reading and reading. I remember sitting and reading with my cartoon and then my plates with my food and a glass of milk. And I was so soaked in the experience of eating and reading, um, mindful. And recently I read that for ADHD people, reading while eating could actually be healthy
Mhm.
because you are eating slower, um, and you are enjoying yourself. So you eat more.
Right, like you'll actually eat it.
Yeah,
And then
you
at the same
finish.
time,
Yeah.
you're a little distracted enough to like, if there's any textural issues, maybe it won't bother you as much.
Yeah, you do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, like my toast has to be crunchy. If not, it's not edible.
Yep. Yeah. Like, oh, it's those like textures because I will like kind of undercook my vegetables and my pasta because like it needs to have like a little
Yeah,
it
the
needs that
crunch.
texture. Like
Oh, yeah, overcooked broccoli. That's not
oh
edible.
no, not at all. Oh, But kind
Yeah,
of
and
speaking
crisps
about,
or
oh,
chips, the
yes,
crunching chips.
those are good.
Yeah.
Sort of speaking about nutrients though, what are some things have you seen coming of like pop up in the literature for like ADHD and PMDD?
Yeah, I have been very careful with recommending things because I have studied for a year about nutrition and food in connection to my teaching education, but I'm not a nutritionist. So
Right, like we want to be super, super aware of this. Like
yeah, so I'm just,
not advice, it's just what we see in the literature typically, you know?
yeah. So what I have seen over and over again is magnesium, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, and iron, and vitamin B, vitamin D, and calcium. And I also read this in a book I bought recently, that a Norwegian doctor, she was diagnosed herself after she got kids that were also diagnosed. So she wrote a book, and in Norway, we are super careful about recommending things. It has to be super sure. If not, we are, yeah. So when she also recommended this, I think it's safe to say that we this is something that we need. And also
Yeah.
protein. Yeah.
Oh yeah, protein is so important.
Yeah. So I have a golden food, and that's an egg, because eggs contain so much of what we need ADHD. So protein, vitamin B, yeah, it's so healthy for us and easy to make. It's, you can cook it, or you can scramble it, or you can, yeah.
Yeah, I make them into an egg bake so that I can just have it for the whole week. And then I like to add like hash browns and
Yeah.
peppers, spinach, so that you're
Oh
also getting lots
yeah.
of good fibers and vegetables in it too.
Yeah.
It's very good because then you just have to throw it in the microwave and you're good for the whole week.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes egg salad. In Norway,
Mm.
we eat a lot of bread, um, on whole grain bread. So it's healthy, but it's a lot of carbs.
Mhm.
So if I make an egg salad, and I love to just spread it on my bread and maybe have something else with it, and yeah, it's so good. So eggs, yeah, it's my favorite. Yeah,
Definitely.
superfood. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I have discovered that magnesium and zinc, they are actually helping my sleep and my muscle tensions. And they also prevent some side effects from my medication. So when I remember to take those, usually before I go to bed, so they don't interfere with the medication too much, I actually sleep better. I feel more relaxed, and yeah, it's very, very good for me. And omega-3, we eat a lot of fish in Norway.
Yeah, we do not in the States.
No, no. So, but I don't eat enough. So salmon is very expensive, even though Norway is a salmon nation. But
Really? It's expensive over there too?
yeah,
I guess I just kind of assumed like, oh, you guys like have a lot of salmon. It's probably not that bad.
oh no, I bought last week 4 thin slices of salmon. I think it was maybe in dollars, $19.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that a lot?
That's a lot. Are
Yeah,
they like serving sizes or were
yeah,
they?
serving sizes. So
Oh
if I,
man.
yeah, so if I should make dinner for we are 5 people. So
Hmm.
then I would have to buy two. So I made a casserole.
Wow,
So that,
that's so much. Yeah. In the
yeah,
States, like for like two people, I can get some enough salmon and that's about like $7 to $8.
yeah, it's half the price. So,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah. So, but I have an uncle who's really good at smoking salmon, so he provides us with smoked salmon sometimes. And
That's
it's so good.
amazing.
Yeah. And we also have a bread spread of mackerel. I don't know if you have that. It's mackerel in tomato sauce.
That sounds good.
It's very good.
There's not a lot of people who, or I mean, honestly, we don't have a lot of variety of fish in general supermarkets. But
Yeah.
mackerel, that's a really good one for omega-3s.
Yeah, it's very good. So mixed with the tomato sauce and just spread it on the bread and put on some mayonnaise and some cucumber or avocado. It's super good and super healthy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I see quite often in the literature. Dietary omega-3s whenever possible for ADHD. And I'm just going
Yeah.
to bring this back to that conversation that we had about the brain and those enzymes that regulate dopamine, essentially, like break it down, right? So both of those, but mainly the MAOA1 are regulated by omega-3s. So like the omega-3s, the EPA and DHA, those are the ones that we find in basically just fish, fatty fish like tuna, mackerel,
Yeah.
salmon. Like we also find it in algae, but like not in easily digestible amounts. Like you'd have to eat a lot of algae to be able to get your daily value.
Yeah.
But yeah, so omega-3s, like those ones found in fish, are incredibly important for your brain health. And yet most of us don't eat them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to though, because not a lot of people like can access fish. And so that's
Yeah.
the other hard part.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I am so lucky to live by the sea. So we can go fishing when we want to.
Mhm. Do you have
Um,
salmon by you in the sea or no? Are they
no,
just farmed?
they are mostly farmed, and it's not. We are not allowed to fish just close up to the farms.
Oh, sad.
Yeah, sometimes they run away, so then it's just go fishing. But it's very rarely. So mostly when we go fishing, it's cod and other white fish. So that's good too, but it's not
Mhm.
so omega-3.
Right.
Yeah, so, but it's healthy in other ways though.
Yeah, I mean, eating like 2 to 3 servings of fish a week is so ideal for general health.
Yeah, I think it's the recommendations also in the
Hmm.
Norwegian health government. So,
Good.
but I don't.
I don't remember if it's a recommendation in the States. I just remember that that is the ideal.
Yeah, it is. I think maybe the World Health Organization said something about that. But it's still hard to manage to eat the recommended amount of fish. It's just family life. It's busy and it's hard to get time to make the dinner and eat it between school and the activities. So yeah, it's
I
harder
mean,
to
life is
do
hard.
it. Yeah. Um,
So
but
omega-3s, that was super important.
yeah.
Magnesium, obviously. Magnesium, that's another one that's actually really important for ADHD because um again the enzyme, so the COMT enzyme is magnesium dependent, so it needs
Mhm.
magnesium to be able to regulate itself. So that's just another reason why magnesium
Yeah.
intake is so important. Like I mean, I personally um I try to eat pumpkin seeds as often as possible because they
Oh.
contain so much magnesium. It's like one of the best sources of magnesium out there. And
Oh.
then also cocoa powder. So I
Yeah.
will make like a protein morning smoothie and add cocoa powder to it, like probably 2 or 3 tablespoons. I don't know how much that is in grams.
Oh.
But it's like honestly, I don't even measure it. I just like use a regular spoon and just dump my heart's desire of chocolate in there.
Yeah.
Oh, and it tastes so good.
Absolutely. I made a chili um, casserole today, and I added some chocolate into dark chocolate. Uh,
Yeah.
It tastes so good. You should absolutely try.
I will. You'll have
Yeah.
to, yeah, send me a recipe or something. Wait,
Yeah,
you
it's
said a wait, what did you say?
a chili.
A chip, like
Chili
like a
casserole.
bean chili
Yeah.
with cocoa powder
Yeah.
or chocolate gel?
I didn't have a chocolate powder today, so I added dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate.
Yeah.
I've literally never heard of this before.
No, I saw that in a recipe and I thought that's for me. I have to try.
Wow.
So
That
yeah,
feels
you should.
like two random flavors, but if you say it tastes good, I believe you.
Yeah. Have you tried hot chocolate with chili?
No.
You should. Oh, that's so good. Oh, we had
Wow.
a
Okay.
cafe here. It's not here anymore, but they served the best cocoa with a little slice of chili inside. So you have to take it out after a while because otherwise it's very, very hot. But oh, the chili and the chocolate together. Oh, that's so good.
Wait, are we talking about like chili powder or like chili, like, like the soup?
The powder or yeah, the powder.
Okay, that's why. Okay. So I was
You
thinking like the bean soup.
you call it pepper, maybe.
Yeah, chili pepper.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That and chocolate. Yeah,
Okay,
hot
okay.
chocolate
That
and
makes a little
chili
bit more
pepper.
sense. I was all about like, you know what, those is interesting, like soup with chocolate in it. Okay. Okay, I see what
Yeah,
you're going for now. I can see
yeah,
those two flavors making more sense.
yeah, absolutely.
Uh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So hot chocolate with chili pepper.
Yes. That sounds great.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, but yeah, cocoa. That's a really good one for ADHD, honestly. Like, most,
Yeah.
a lot of us just love it anyway. Like, if you're gonna eat something for ADHD, like, make sure you enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. And I listened to your podcast and I heard you say that. And it's just the best news I've heard ever. So I have a teenage daughter. She's 15 tomorrow. And she was so delighted. Oh, she loves chocolate. And when I said it's healthy for us, she was,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is.
Yes. I mean, obviously, ideally, we're going for the ones that don't have a ton of added sugar in it. But like dark chocolate, oh,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
so good. So good for us.
Oh, it is. Sometimes I have to cut back on my sugar sometimes. So I try to replace the chocolate with dates,
Mhm.
and it works. I don't know why. Do they contain any magnesium?
I honestly don't know the nutritional profile of dates because I don't like them, so I haven't researched them.
No, I have found one brand that's so good. The other ones I don't like so much, but um, yeah, and it works for the cravings. It could be just the sugar. I don't know. Yeah.
Possible, but I mean,
Um,
at the end of the day, it all breaks down. It's just dates probably have more health promoting nutrients in it than just plain
yeah,
sugar. So,
yeah, probably.
uh, and then
But
I also wanted to talk a little bit about how you said vitamin D is super important. So what
yeah,
we see in the literature with people who have PMDD, we actually see decreases in brain metabolism of vitamin D during that late luteal phase.
yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
very. And that explains also so much because in Norway we have a lower recommendation of levels for
Mm-hmm.
vitamin D than you have in the US. I think they have increased it now, but it's still lower. And when I have taken my blood tests and they say it's fine, your levels are fine. But when I have had higher levels of vitamin D, I have felt so much better. And I wanted to avoid the toxic reactions to vitamin D, so
Oh
I read
yeah.
about it, and I found out that the safe levels are actually higher than what the Norwegian government recommends. So I have been trying to get more vitamin D, and research also said that ADHD people need more vitamin D. So yeah, and it's very interesting about the PMDD too. It
Yeah, it all
explains
just
so
kind of
much.
plays together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, like with the calcium, yes, we see so many people with PMDD not having enough calcium in their like when you do tests. Like that's a
Yeah,
super common deficiency. But
yeah,
that's where the protein comes in. Like, because a lot of people with PMDD, they do end up eating plenty of calcium, but maybe they're not eating enough protein. But when you eat your protein, it helps with that metabolism of
yeah,
calcium. And so there we go.
yeah,
You're gonna feeling a little bit better because your body's actually using what it needs to use.
yeah. And that is sometimes very so hard to, if I started to think about I have to eat this and this and that, and also this is very good, and at these times it's also, and then it's just chaotic, and I just
Mm,
can't. Yeah. So my best advice for myself is what I learned the year when I studied about food and nutrition, um, and that's balance. Everything needs to be in balance. If you,
yes.
yeah, if you just eat a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and just try to eat normal, healthy food and not dieting in one direction or the other, just eat balanced, and that's the best recommendation. And I have stuck to that because, yeah, it makes sense because then you get everything you need.
Yeah, that's actually
Unless,
exactly what I always try to encourage people to do. Because,
yeah,
like what you said, as long as you're eating enough and from a variety of sources, like your body is so smart and it will use what it takes.
yeah,
And also, if you're eating from a variety of sources, you are getting all those nutrients that you need.
yeah.
So the goal really isn't to micromanage all of your nutrient intake. It's
No, because
more,
when
yeah,
it
that's so
gets difficult,
stressful.
it's too hard then. So
Yeah,
just balance. Balance is key.
it is just balance.
Yeah.
Make sure you're eating enough protein. Make sure you're eating a lot of different fruits and vegetables, and
Yeah.
you're probably going to be okay. Oh, and some good fish.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you live in Norway, because daylight during
Mm,
winter is, it gets dark here around, it starts around 3 now in the
mm.
afternoon. And it's not light again until 9:30 in the morning. So vitamin D is hard to get in the winter. And sometimes the summers are very rainy.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
so
it's kind of just hard to get your vitamin D in general. And that is definitely in general, like before anyone takes any supplement, just go to your doctor, get it tested,
yeah,
right? Like check and see what your levels actually are, and
absolutely.
then potentially supplement after that.
Yeah,
Like one of my biggest fears is telling somebody to supplement and then they actually are fine, like their levels are
yeah,
okay, and then they get toxicity. Like
yeah.
that's not what we want.
No, absolutely not. That's my biggest fear too, because I don't want to harm anyone.
Mm-mm.
So yeah,
But yeah, that's why I always preach dietary sources because you really can't get toxicity through dietary means. That's
no,
very hard.
very hard. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but we drink milk with added vitamin D.
Oh
Um,
yeah, same here.
yeah, so that's one source, and I
Salmon's another
take.
source,
Hmm?
actually. Salmon, that's actually another source.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And sometimes, especially in luteal phase, I try to take like 20 micrograms.
Mhm.
Is that correct? Yeah, of vitamin D for a few days, and I find it helps actually. Yeah, so vitamin D, when I am very low, I tend to be more depressed and more fatigue, more brain fog. So I have to make sure that my levels are okay. Yeah. And vitamin
Yeah.
B also, that's
Oh yeah, the B vitamins, those ones,
yeah,
super
they're more
important.
complicated than I thought they were,
Oh
because
yeah.
I always thought, oh yeah, they're water soluble, so they're fine. But yeah, I've learned now that you can't just eat too much, because that's toxic
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, yeah. On the bright side, it's still hard to because honestly, a lot of the foods that are high in the B vitamins, most people don't eat. But if you do eat a lot of them, then like yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
if you add supplements too in
oh
addition.
yeah, the
Yeah,
supplementation, that's where it's hard.
yeah,
So,
that's very hard. Sometimes I think if I just take multivitamins, then I should be fine. But I don't know. I think it's very hard to know without checking all the time what I need.
yeah. And
So
then that's the hard part. Like
yeah, so
we want to
that's
be
why
perfect, but that's not going to happen.
no. So that's why I think it's easier to just focus on the food, because that's easier to manage.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
then
it
you
is.
know. Yeah.
And hopefully try to take that pressure off because that's another thing to remember. Stress can basically make our ability to absorb nutrients a little bit harder. So,
Yeah.
so adding that variable too. Oh man.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
noticed one very strange thing. Now I have in for 2 weeks I have been feeling less stressed. My cortisol levels are probably going down, and I have lost my stress weight. Isn't that very strange?
Yeah. How does that
Because
make you feel?
um, I just noticed it was, oh, really? Because I gained not much weight, just a little bit, stress weight, because
Mhm.
probably because the body reacts to the stress, and this is a dangerous situation. We have to be prepared.
Yeah. The body tries to be really smart.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work the way we want it to though.
No. So I have tried to help my body with herbs, tea,
Mm.
and my techniques, and I have allowed myself to feel what I have been afraid to feel. And I feel more relaxed. My anxiety is better. And I lost the stress weight. It's very
I love herbs.
interesting. Yeah. Huh? Sorry.
I just said I love herbs.
Oh, yeah, I
I
love
use
herbs.
them a
Oh,
lot.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Me too.
Mm.
I bought myself a dehydrator. So, yeah.
So are you gonna go out and do some collecting and hydrate your herbs and stuff?
Oh, yes. I did a lot of that in the fall. And I discovered that the lingonberries, do you have that in the US?
Honestly, I'm
Lingonberries?
not sure. I know that I can buy lingonberry jelly, but
Yeah, it's very
I don't
small
know if we
cranberries.
break.
They are related to the cranberries, I think.
Mhm.
Little sister. They are actually a superfood
Mm.
because they contain so extremely much of antioxidants and
Mm.
so many things that we need. And also the leaves. So I usually freeze the berries and then um, take them up and stir them with sugar to make a sort of jam.
Nice.
And we eat that with meat sometimes for dinner, just to add some flavor. So unless I had a urine tract infection, and I read about, because I don't want to use penicillin if I don't have to. So I read about the lingonberries leaves. So I went outside and collected the leaves and boiled them. And I drank the tea for a few days, and it was gone.
That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, and that was just the leaves.
What
Yeah.
other herbs or flowers or berries do you tend to use?
My favorite is probably from my garden. It's black currant.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother made the amazing syrup. I don't think you have that in. Maybe it's a European or Scandinavian thing. We call it soft. You boil it with sugar and conserve it in bottles, and then you mix with water. So you can, yeah, take a little bit
Yeah,
in a
no,
glass.
we do not have that here.
No, and you are missing out. It's
Wow.
so good, and it's like sitting in my grandma's kitchen, and she takes out her syrup and mix it with water, and it's like a very fruity drink without bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
Just a very fruity drink. Yeah, it's so good. So I love to make that, and also elderflowers. Of the wild things, that's my absolute favorite. It tastes so fresh, and yeah, so I make syrup of that too, and I freeze that. So yeah, all the nutrients are inside because they're not boiled away.
Mm-hmm.
So I add some lemon to it and some sugar, and it's so good for coughs and colds in the winter.
Oh
And
yeah.
also,
I make some good elderberry tea
oh
with, I mean, a
yeah,
few other ones like white clover, echinacea root.
yeah,
Save it
oh
for
yeah,
so long. But right before like you feel that cold coming on,
yeah,
works like a charm.
yeah, absolutely, and thyme too. Um, I also make elderberry soft and mix them with mossberries. Do you have those?
I
They're
honestly
tiny,
haven't heard of
tiny
mossberries.
black. Sorry,
I haven't heard of them,
no,
honestly.
they're tiny, blue, almost black, and they grow beside the lingonberries. And they're wild, and they are so good. You can make jelly or syrups or tea, or and mixed with the elderberries. It's so good. Oh, it tastes Christmas for me. Yeah, and all those wildflowers too. I love going outside and collecting herbs and dehydrating them.
Me too. That's exactly what like our kitchen looks like. It just looks like a lot of drying herbs right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that.
Like I found some, well, my mother-in-law grows lavender, so I have a lot of that hanging up right now.
Oh,
But there was some wild catnip out I found on like a random
oh,
park, and so I harvested a lot of that.
yeah,
Oh, but then just like in general, like other ones you can find around. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There's so many. I don't think I know the English names for all the flowers, but when I was in London, I bought a book about wild plants and stuff that they used for traditional English. Uh, yeah, though I haven't studied that book yet, but
Mm.
it's a beautiful book. I'm so looking forward to the winter and sitting under a blanket and reading.
I'm trying to be excited for the winter. I'm really trying.
Me
Um,
too. I'm thinking about those things,
Gotta stay
blankets
positive.
and blankets and books and tea.
Yes. I think the last thing I want to just talk about though is, so we obviously just like talked about all these foods we want to incorporate, but what about different things that we see maybe making it worse?
Yeah, I have noticed that I eat too much sugar. Because when I forget to eat, I have to have something fast and quick. And also, I have been stressed and depressed, and sugar makes me feel better for a little
Mm-hmm.
while. Yeah. So that prevents me from eating healthy because then I feel not hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's something I have to find a balance to. Um, and also, I'm not a big drinker, but I have noticed that alcohol makes me more unfocused for days after. And I was so disappointed. Last year, I was alone at home for a few days, and I was so excited about organizing the whole house.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a
Classic.
really, really good day, organized so much, and make plans for next day. And I obviously forgot to eat, so I went to the
Yep.
store and bought
Always happens.
yeah. So I bought a pizza and two small beers, and I watched a movie and ate my pizza and drank two beers and went to bed. And the next day, it was like I had a brain damage.
Mm.
I I had plans. I was not able to go through with anything. It was brain fog. I had so much difficulties in prioritizing what to do because I knew what I wanted to do, but it was so hard to get it done. I was so disappointed in myself. Yeah, just so that's an eye opener, really.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that makes sense. Like, consumption of alcohol is associated with, in general, like over time, worsened dopamine sensitivity. But
Yeah,
then it also impacts what we call histamine. So I'm sure you've learned about histamine, but
yeah,
both for PMDD and for ADHD, excessive histamine can actually make symptoms worse. And something that we also tend to see is when women who have PMDD are like on that like luteal phase aspect, histamine tends to go up. And that's actually why a lot of people who have PMDD tend to take antihistamines because then they actually experience better symptoms.
yeah,
But alcohol releases histamine, so that's also already not a great thing. But it also inhibits something called DAO or diamine oxidase, and that's the one thing that regulates histamine in our body. So it's
yeah,
like a double whammy, like it does not good things for our mental health.
absolutely. And I didn't know that until I saw what you wrote about that. And yeah, it made so much sense. We have had alcoholism in my family, so I have seen how that damages the brain and the body. You just decay. Um,
Really hard to control.
yeah. And I also think that when you self-medicate with alcohol, um, it feels maybe better at the time, but it damages more and more of the brain so that you're just damaging yourself.
Mhm. And
Yeah,
that's like where it's really hard because like that short term, it feels like it's okay. Or
yeah,
maybe it makes you feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
But long
Yeah.
term, it's really not doing anything good for us.
No. So yeah, I have seen the effects of that. So I'm very careful with alcohol. But I like to have, if we have some nice dinner, it's nice to have a glass of wine, but it's very rarely, it's not every month. Yeah, it's just occasionally. And yeah,
Yeah,
just not
that's me
make big
too.
plan, not make big organizing plans the day after.
Yep. Yep. Like,
Oh,
I mean, because that's another thing, because restriction is not helpful for ADHD
no.
in the majority of cases, right? So, like, if we tell ourselves, like, no more alcohol, what are
Yeah,
we going to do? We're going to crave it.
absolutely.
So,
I've not been, I smoked when I was younger, and I've not been thinking about that. But if I start thinking I cannot smoke, then I want to smoke.
mm,
If I'm cutting back on sugar, and I can't think about, I can't eat sugar. I have to think about other options to eat. So
right.
I see the same with my daughter. She's afraid of the dark, so I have tried to learn her to. You must not focus on what you are afraid of. You have to focus on what you want to think about instead.
Mm,
So that's ADHD.
yeah. And that's again, like, where that balanced diet, adding as many foods as you can,
Yeah,
crowds out all those other things. So,
yeah,
yeah.
balance.
Well, this is a lovely conversation. I did not think we were going to talk this long, but I loved it.
Yeah, I
Well,
always talk too long. I'm sorry about that.
no, it was so good. But before we finish and close up, I just want you to feel free to talk all about like the resource that you've created, where to find you, because you have a lot of great information and a great support presence online. So,
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned I had collected some information and in different Google Sheets, and I had to gather them so that I could find them. And I spent a lot of time doing that. So I thought maybe some other people could make use of this too. So I made a small book, about 40 pages. And yeah, it's about how um, how the symptoms um, change during the cycle, how the hormones affect you during luteal phase, and how when you feel good, when you don't feel good, how the brain works. I added some management techniques that I found helpful. Yeah, and I wrote about PMS and PMDD and how to know which is which, and some nutrients that I can recommend, but I also am very clear you have to check your levels. And I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just a teacher who tries to manage my own health. So yeah.
yeah, and I will say that honestly, this was an amazing resource. So June shared it with me, and wow, had so
Oh,
much amazing just information about understanding the cycle, differences between PMS and PMDD, how to even manage this. Like, it's not just nutrition, it's not just what is it about, it's how do you manage it? Like, you give
yeah.
so many good tools and tricks and tips, and yeah, it's just a great, great resource that I
Oh,
would
thank you.
definitely
I'm so glad.
recommend purchasing.
I'm
And
so glad to hear that. And I have
yeah.
to say that I have divided it into the phases and added some exercise tips for each phases. And I don't mean that you have to follow. In this phase, I do yoga, and this phase, I do weightlifting. I'm just meant to say that if you don't feel like running today because you are in this phase. You can do something else, and that's fine.
Mhm. Like
So-
it's okay to do what your body is feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
love
I
that.
showed this to my daughter. She's almost 15, and she said, "Mom, everyone should read this. Every
Mhm.
girl and the boys too," she said.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, that's a great compliment coming from my daughter. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then where do people find you online?
Yeah, I have an Instagram account. It's Rhubarb Digital. And I Rhubarb Digital CO. And that's because I love collecting herbs, and I love my garden, and I love rhubarbs. Yeah, and I also have an online store. You find the link in my Instagram account. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to have all of those linked in the show notes so that if anyone has difficulties finding anything, you just click the link.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks again for talking. This was a lovely conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.